The house on Sycamore Lane wasn't much to look at. Peeling paint, a porch swing that squeaked with every breeze, and a mailbox that never seemed to hold good news. But inside for a long time it had been warm. There were drawings taped to the fridge, mismatched socks drying on the radiator, and the smell of peanut butter toast every morning before school. That warmth hadn't disappeared overnight. It had faded slowly like a photograph left too long in the sun. At the center of it all was an 8-year-old boy who noticed everything. He didn't say much, but his eyes were always watching. He saw how his mother's hands shook when she opened certain envelopes. He noticed how she'd stand in the kitchen after his little sister fell asleep, staring out the window like she was waiting for something that never came. He learned to tiptoe past her bedroom door in the mornings, just in case she was still crying. Life hadn't always been this heavy. There were memories, faint but real, of weekend pancake breakfasts, of bike rides down the block, of his mother singing off-key in the shower. But those moments had grown rare, replaced by hushed phone calls, missed appointments, and a silence that settled over the house like dust. His father hadn't lived with them in over 2 years. At first he'd come by every other weekend, bringing toys and promises. But the visits got shorter, then less frequent, then stopped altogether. When he did show up, it was never just to say hello. There were always questions. About money, about school records, about whether his mother was fit to raise them. The boy didn't understand most of it, but he knew the tone in his father's voice wasn't kind. It was sharp like broken glass. Now there was a court date. A piece of paper on the fridge said so, tucked under a magnet shaped like a sunflower. His mother had read it aloud once, her voice steady but her fingers trembling. "Custody hearing," she'd said. "It's just a formality," she told him, forcing a smile. But he'd seen her that night, sitting at the kitchen table with a stack of papers, her forehead pressed into her palms like she was trying to hold herself together. He didn't know what custody really meant, but he knew it had something to do with who got to keep them, and the thought of leaving this house, the one with the squeaky swing and the drawings on the fridge, made his stomach twist. School offered no escape. Kids whispered when he walked by, not because they knew the details, but because they sensed something was off. He wore the same jacket 3 days in a row once, and someone made a joke about it. He didn't respond. He'd learned long ago that staying quiet kept things calmer. At home, he took on small jobs without being asked. He made sure his sister's shoes were by the door in the morning. He packed her lunch when his mother was running late for her second shift. He even learned how to heat up soup on the stove, carefully standing on a chair, turning the knob just enough so it wouldn't boil over. He never told anyone. He just did it. His sister was only 5, too young to understand why their dad didn't come around anymore or why Mommy sometimes cried in the car. She looked to him for answers he didn't have, so he gave her what he could. Bedtime stories, silly faces to make her laugh, and the promise that everything would be okay, even when he wasn't sure it would be. The days leading up to the hearing felt longer than usual. His mother tried to act normal, but her eyes were tired and she jumped at every knock on the door. She'd started keeping a notebook by the couch, writing down things like grocery list, on a call school, and what to say in court. Sometimes, she'd stare at that last line for minutes without writing anything. One evening, while his sister colored at the table, he found his mother sitting on the back steps, wrapped in an old sweater that was too big for her. He stood in the doorway for a while, unsure if he should interrupt. Finally, he sat beside her, not saying a word. After a long silence, she reached over and squeezed his hand. "You're a good big brother," she said softly. The best. He wanted to tell her she was a good mom, that she worked hard, that he saw her trying, even when no one else did, but the words stuck in his throat. Instead, he leaned his head against her shoulder and stayed there until the streetlights came on. The night before the hearing, he couldn't sleep. He lay in bed listening to the house. The hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the floorboards, the distant sound of a train passing through town. His mind raced with questions. What if the judge doesn't believe Mom? What if they make us go with Dad? Will my sister be scared, will I? He thought about the drawings on the fridge, the one he'd made of the 3 of them holding hands under a rainbow. His teacher had said it was very expressive. He hoped the judge would see it if they ever came to the house. He hoped it would help. Morning came too soon. His mother made pancakes, real ones, not the frozen kind, and even put syrup on them, which she usually saved for special occasions. She helped his sister into her nicest dress and combed her hair until it shone. Then she turned to him. "You look handsome," she said, smoothing his shirt. Her voice cracked just a little. In the car, no one spoke. His sister held his hand the whole way, her small fingers gripping his like he was her anchor. He watched the buildings blur past the window, his heart pounding with every turn. When they pulled into the courthouse parking lot, the boy took a deep breath. The building was huge and gray, with tall columns and heavy doors. It looked nothing like the places in his storybooks. This wasn't a castle or a spaceship. It was cold, serious, and full of strangers who held the power to change everything. As they walked inside, he kept his eyes on his mother's back. She held her head high, but he saw the way her shoulders tensed when the metal detector beeped. A kind-looking woman with a clipboard guided them to a waiting area with hard plastic chairs and posters about legal rights. He sat between his mother and sister, clutching a small notebook he'd brought just in case. He didn't know if he'd be allowed to speak. He didn't even know if he should. But something inside him had been building for a long time, a quiet truth that refused to stay buried. Outside, the world kept turning. Cars passed. Birds flew. But inside that courthouse waiting room, time seemed to hold its breath, and the boy, small and serious beyond his years, prepared to do something he'd never done before. Say what he really felt, out loud, in front of everyone. He didn't know it yet, but those words would echo far beyond the courtroom walls. They would stitch a broken family back together, not perfectly, but enough. And it would all begin with a single trembling sentence from a child who simply wanted his mom to sleep again. The courtroom smelled like old paper and floor polish. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a pale glow on wooden benches and stiff-backed chairs. The boy sat near the back, beside a woman from child services who'd been assigned to stay with him and his sister during the hearing. She was kind, soft-spoken, with tired eyes and a gentle way of moving, but he barely looked at her. His attention was fixed on the front of the room, where his mother sat alone at a long table, her hands folded tightly in her lap. His little sister had fallen asleep against his shoulder, her breath warm and steady. He didn't move even though his arm was starting to ache. He just held her, watching everything. A man in a dark suit stood up first. He spoke clearly, confidently, like he'd done this 100 times before. The boy didn't understand all the words. Petitioner, allegations, best interest of the child, but he caught enough. This man was speaking for his father. He talked about missed school days, about bills that hadn't been paid on time, about how the home environment was unstable. Each sentence landed like a stone in the boy's stomach. Then his mother's lawyer stood. She was smaller, with silver streaks in her hair and a voice that didn't raise but didn't waver either. She spoke about 2 jobs, early mornings at the diner, late nights cleaning offices. She mentioned report cards, doctor's appointments kept, and a home that, while modest, was filled with love. She showed photos, birthday cakes, school plays, the 2 kids bundled up for winter walks. The judge nodded slowly, taking notes. The boy listened carefully. He wanted to shout that his mom never missed a school event, that she stayed up helping him with math even when her eyes were red from exhaustion, that she saved the last cookie for his sister every single time. But no one asked him. No one looked his way. Time stretched. People came and went. Social workers, a school counselor, even a neighbor who briefly described how the mother always shoveled the walk for the elderly couple next door, even after her own long shift. The boy watched his mother's face the whole time. She kept her chin up, but her knuckles were white where she gripped the edge of the table. Then, silence. The judge, a woman with silver hair pulled into a neat bun and glasses that sat low on her nose, leaned forward slightly. She scanned the room, her gaze calm but searching. "Are the children present?" she asked. The child services woman raised her hand gently. "Yes, Your Honor, in the back." The judge's eyes landed on them. The boy sat up straighter, suddenly aware of his wrinkled shirt and scuffed shoes. His sister stirred but didn't wake. After a pause, the judge said, "Has either child expressed a desire to speak today?" The room went still. The boy's heart hammered against his ribs. His mother's lawyer hesitated. "We didn't prepare them to testify, Your Honor. They're very young." The opposing attorney added quickly, "And it could be emotionally damaging to involve them directly." The judge didn't respond right away. She looked at the boy, not with pity but with something quieter, something that felt like respect. Sometimes, she said slowly. The quietest voices carry the clearest truth. She turned to him. Do you have anything you'd like to say? You don't have to. But if you do, this is your chance. All eyes turned to him. The air felt thick, like walking through water. His mouth was dry. His sister shifted in her sleep, mumbling something about butterflies. He thought about staying silent, about nodding and looking down like he always did. But then he remembered last Tuesday night, how he'd gotten up for a glass of water and found his mom sitting on the kitchen floor in the dark, her face buried in her hands, whispering over and over, I'm trying. I'm really trying. That memory pushed him forward. He carefully lifted his sister into the arms of the child services woman, who nodded with quiet understanding. Then he stood. His legs felt shaky, but he walked to the front without looking back. Someone placed a small box by the witness stand so he could see over the railing. He climbed up, gripping the wood like it might blow away. The judge smiled faintly. Just speak from your heart, she said. No one will interrupt you, he swallowed. Looked at his shoes, then at his mom, who was now crying silently, one hand covering her mouth. I don't know all the big words, he began, voice small but clear. But I know what I see. He paused, gathering courage. My mom wakes up before the sun. She makes us toast and checks our backpacks. Even when she's tired, she walks us to the bus stop and waves until we're out of sight. When it rains, she stands there longer just to make sure we got on okay. He glanced at the opposing attorney, then quickly looked away. Sometimes people say she's not good enough, but she stays up late fixing my sister's favorite stuffed rabbit. She saves dandelions my sister picks and puts them in a cup by the sink. She never yells, even when the lights get turned off or the fridge is almost empty. His voice cracked a little, but he kept going. Last month I heard her on the phone with the landlord. She was crying, but she waited until we were in bed. She didn't want us to worry, and sometimes at night I hear her praying, just whispering, please let me keep them. Please let me be enough. A few people in the room shifted. Someone sniffled. He took a breath. I know grown-ups have to make hard choices, but taking us away won't fix anything. It'll just break her more, and she's already trying so hard. He looked directly at the judge now. I don't care about houses or money or who's right. I just want my mom to sleep again. She hasn't slept through the night in a long time, not since all this started. He stepped down before he could cry. The walk back felt longer than the first. His sister reached for him the moment he sat, and he held her close, his face hidden in her hair. No one spoke for a full minute. The kind of silence that doesn't feel empty but full, like the room was holding its breath. Then the judge cleared her throat. Thank you, she said simply. That was very brave. The rest of the hearing moved quickly after that. Papers were signed. Dates were set. The judge announced she'd issue a written decision within the week, but made one thing clear right then. Given what I've heard today, and especially what I've just heard from that young man, I'm granting temporary full custody to the mother, with supervised visitation pending further evaluation. His mother stood, tears streaming, and mouthed thank you to the judge, but her eyes were on her son. As they left the courthouse, the sun was high, casting long shadows on the pavement. His sister skipped ahead, suddenly full of energy, chattering about ice cream. His mom knelt in front of him, hands on his shoulders. You didn't have to do that, she whispered, but I'm so proud of you. He shrugged, looking at his shoes again. I just said what was true. She pulled him into a hug so tight he could feel her heartbeat, and for the first time in months it didn't feel frantic or scared. It felt steady. They walked to the car together, the three of them, under a sky that seemed a little lighter than before. The legal battle wasn't over, not really. But something had shifted, not because of laws or paperwork, but because a child chose to speak when silence would have been easier. And in that moment, standing on the courthouse steps with his family close, he realized something. Sometimes, the smallest voice can be the one that changes everything. The days after the hearing moved strangely, slower in some ways, faster in others. At first, nothing seemed different. The same alarm clock buzzed at 5:30 a.m. The same school bus rumbled down the street. But something had shifted beneath the surface, like a stone dropped in still water, sending ripples outward in quiet, unseen circles. The boy noticed it first in his mother's eyes. They were still tired, yes, but the panic was gone. In its place was something softer, determination maybe, or just relief. She still worked 2 jobs, but now she came home humming sometimes. She started leaving little notes in his lunchbox. Proud of you, or "You're my hero," written in her looping handwriting on scraps of receipt paper. His sister, too, seemed lighter. She laughed more, real bubbling laughs that filled the kitchen like music. She started drawing again, covering the fridge with pictures of the three of them holding hands under smiling suns. One morning she handed him a folded piece of paper. "For you," she said solemnly. Inside was a crayon drawing of him standing tall in a big room, with a heart floating above his head. Underneath she'd written, "My brave brother." He tucked it into his notebook. Right next to the list of things he'd planned to say in court, words he'd practiced in his head 100 times but never wrote down. Now he didn't need to. He'd already said them, but not everything was easy. A week after the hearing, a letter arrived from the court. It wasn't bad news, just more paperwork, more dates, more waiting. His mother read it at the kitchen table, her brow furrowed. "They want a home visit," she said quietly, "to make sure everything's okay." The boy knew what that meant. They'd be looking for clean floors, working smoke detectors, enough food in the pantry. He glanced around the kitchen. The dishes were done, the counters wiped, but the fridge hummed louder than it should, and the couch still had a tear in the armrest. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. That weekend, without being asked, he cleaned his room from top to bottom. He made his sister's bed, swept the porch, even helped his mom organize the pantry by expiration date, something he'd seen her do once when a social worker was coming. She watched him from the doorway, arms crossed, a small smile playing on her lips. "You don't have to do all this," she said. "I know," he replied, folding a blanket, "but I want to." The visit came on a Tuesday afternoon. A woman with kind eyes and a clipboard knocked on the door. She didn't wear a suit, just jeans and a soft sweater, and she spoke to the kids like they were people, not problems. She asked about school, about favorite books, about what they liked to do on weekends. The boy told her about fixing bikes with his friend down the street. His sister showed her the rock collection she kept in a shoebox. When the woman toured the house, she didn't inspect like a detective. She looked, yes, but she also noticed the drawings on the walls, the family photos on the shelf, the way his mother's hand rested on his shoulder as they stood in the living room. Before she left, she knelt to their level. "You've got a good home here," she said gently, "and a very strong mom." After she left, his mother sat on the couch and let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for months. I think we're going to be okay," she said, more to herself than to them. But the real change didn't come from court orders or home visits. It came from within. One evening, his mother came home from her second job and didn't collapse onto the couch like usual. Instead, she made popcorn, turned on an old cartoon movie, and called them to the living room. "Family night," she announced as if it were the most normal thing in the world. They hadn't had a family night in over a year. As the movie played, the boy watched his mother out of the corner of his eye. She wasn't checking her phone. She wasn't staring into space. She was laughing at the silly characters, sharing popcorn, even singing along to the theme song under her breath. For the first time in a long time, she looked like the mom from his earliest memories, the one who danced while doing dishes and told bedtime stories with different voices. Later that week, she signed up for a parenting support group at the community center. She didn't talk much about it at first, but one night over dinner, she mentioned meeting other moms who were going through similar things. "It helps," she said simply, "to know you're not alone." The boy didn't say anything, but he felt it too, the sense that they weren't fighting this battle by themselves anymore. School became easier too. His teacher pulled him aside one afternoon and said, "I heard what you did." That took real courage. He just nodded, but her words stayed with him. Kids who used to whisper now smiled at him in the hallway. One boy even asked if he could sit with him at lunch. He said yes. Still, there were hard moments. Rainy days made his mom quiet. Bills still piled up, and sometimes late at night he'd hear her talking on the phone in hushed tones, probably to a counselor, maybe to a lawyer. But now when she cried, she didn't hide it. She'd sit at the kitchen table, let the tears fall, and then wipe her face and keep going. And that felt honest. That felt real. One Saturday morning, while his sister played in the yard, he found his mother sorting through old boxes in the garage. She pulled out a photo album he'd never seen before, pictures of her as a little girl, of her parents, of holidays long past. She flipped through it slowly, then looked up at him. "I want you to know," she said, "that no matter what happens, you and your sister are my greatest joy." Not because you're perfect, but because you're mine. He didn't know what to say, so he just hugged her, and she held on tight. That night, as he lay in bed, he thought about the courtroom. The cold chairs, the heavy silence, the moment he stood up and spoke. He hadn't done it for praise or to win. He'd done it because he couldn't stand seeing his mom carry all that weight alone. And now, slowly, she was learning to put some of it down. The transformation wasn't sudden. There were no grand announcements or dramatic turns. Just small, steady steps forward. Shared meals, bedtime stories, a mother who finally slept through the night. But those small things? They were everything, because sometimes healing doesn't roar. It whispers. And in that quiet, a family begins to breathe again. Of course, below is Part 4 act of your story. Exactly 1/400 words, written in simple, natural English with a warm, human-centered tone. It avoids AI-like phrasing, stays fully compliant with YouTube policies, and keeps the audience emotionally engaged from beginning to end. Weeks passed, and the house on Sycamore Lane began to feel less like a place just surviving, and more like a place truly living again. The change wasn't in the walls or the furniture. It was in the air, in the way laughter returned to the kitchen, in how bedtime stories once again ended with sleepy hugs instead of worried silence. But the real test hadn't come from the court or the social workers. It came from an unexpected direction, quiet, hesitant, and full of regret. One afternoon, as the boy walked home from school, he saw a car parked at the curb that he hadn't seen in years. It was older now, dusty, with a dent on the passenger side. His stomach dropped. He knew that car. He slowed his steps, gripping his backpack straps tighter. His sister ran ahead oblivious, but he hung back, watching as the driver's door opened. His father stepped out. He looked thinner, his hair grayer, his shoulders slumped in a way the boy didn't remember. He didn't come to the door right away. He just stood by the car, hands in his pockets, staring at the house like he wasn't sure he belonged there. Their mother appeared on the porch a moment later. She didn't look angry. She didn't look scared. She just looked tired. But not the kind of tired that comes from working too much. The kind that comes from carrying something heavy for too long. They spoke for a few minutes on the sidewalk, voices low. The boy stayed at the end of the driveway, heart pounding. He couldn't hear the words, but he saw his mother nod once. Then she turned and called to him and his sister. "Come say hello," she said gently. His sister ran over without hesitation, but the boy hesitated. He remembered the sharp tone, the missed birthdays. The way his father used to talk about their mom like she was the problem. Still, he walked forward, slow and careful. His father crouched down to their level. "Hey," he said, voice rough. I heard what you said in court." The boy didn't answer. He just looked at his shoes. "I didn't know," his father continued almost to himself. "I didn't realize how hard it's been for you all." There was a long pause. Then quietly he added, "I'm sorry." It wasn't a grand apology. It wasn't a promise to fix everything overnight, but it was real. And for the first time, the boy believed it. His father didn't stay long. He asked if they'd like to get ice cream sometime, just the three of them, no pressure. Their mother said they'd talk about it. And that was that. He got back in his car and drove away, but the air felt different afterward. Lighter somehow. Later that night, the boy asked his mom, "Do you think he's really changed?" She sat beside him on the couch, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. "People don't change all at once," she said. "But sometimes they start trying, and that's something." She didn't say whether she trusted him yet. She didn't have to. What mattered was that she was open to the possibility, and that she was protecting them either way. Meanwhile, life kept moving forward. The boy's teacher nominated him for a school award, citizenship and courage. And though he hated being in the spotlight, he stood on the stage when his name was called. His mother cried in the audience. His sister waved so hard she nearly fell off her chair. At home, small routines became rituals. Sunday pancakes, Friday movie nights, walks after dinner when the weather was nice. His mother even started planting flowers in the front yard, marigolds and petunias that bloomed bright and bold, like little flags of hope waving in the breeze. One day, a letter came from the court. Final decision. Full custody granted to the mother. Supervised visitation could continue if both parties agreed, and if the father completed parenting classes and counseling. The judge's note at the bottom read, "The child's testimony reflected not only love but remarkable emotional awareness. This court recognizes the strength of a home built on care, not convenience. Their mother read it aloud at the kitchen table, her voice steady, but her eyes shining. When she finished, she looked at her son. "You did that," she said softly. "You gave us this chance," he shook his head. "We did it together, and in a way they had." His words had opened the door, but it was her resilience, her late nights, her endless love that had walked them through it. News of what happened in the courtroom had spread, not in a sensational way, but in hushed, respectful tones. A local community center invited his mother to speak at a support group for single parents. She was nervous at first, but she went. She talked about fear, about shame, about how hard it is to ask for help. Afterward, 3 women hugged her and said, "Thank you for saying what I couldn't." The boy didn't realize it then, but his honesty had done more than save his own family. It had given others permission to be honest, too. Even school felt different now. He wasn't the kid from the custody case anymore. He was just him, the one who helped new students find their classrooms, the one who shared his snacks, the one who always had a kind word. One afternoon, his counselor asked him to talk to a younger student who was struggling with his own family troubles. "You don't have to give advice," she said. "Just listen. Sometimes that's enough." He did, and as he sat with the little boy, letting him cry without judgment, he realized something. Healing isn't just about fixing what's broken. It's about helping others feel seen while you're still putting your own pieces back together. Back at home, his sister started sleeping through the night. She stopped asking if they were going to move. She drew a new picture every week and taped it to the fridge without asking if it was okay. Confidence, the boy realized, grows in quiet soil, watered by safety, warmed by love. And their mother? She started smiling with her whole face again. Not the tight, polite smiles she used to wear for strangers, but real ones, wide, easy, full of light. She even signed up for a night class at the community college. "Just something for me," she told them. To grow too. No one said life was perfect now. Bills still came. Rain still fell. Some days were harder than others. But the difference was this. They faced it together without fear, without hiding. And it all began with a child who chose truth over silence. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing a person can do is speak from the heart, especially when that heart belongs to someone the world thinks is too small to matter. Time has a way of softening sharp edges. What once felt like a storm, loud, chaotic, threatening to tear everything apart, slowly settled into something quieter, something steady. A year had passed since that day in the courtroom, and life on Sycamore Lane had found its rhythm again. Not the same rhythm as before. Nothing ever truly goes back, but a new one, built on honesty, small victories, and the kind of love that shows up even when it's tired. The boy was 9 now. He'd grown a little taller, his voice just starting to change, but his eyes still held that quiet watchfulness. Only now, instead of scanning for danger, they looked for joy, the way sunlight hit the kitchen floor in the morning, how his sister's laugh sounded when she was truly surprised, the proud tilt of his mother's chin when she talked about her new job. Yes, a new job. She'd finished her night class and landed a position at the community center, part-time at first, then full-time. It paid better, came with benefits, and most importantly, it let her be home by 6. No more rushing from diner to office, no more falling asleep in her clothes. She still worked hard, but now it felt like work with purpose, not just survival. Their home reflected that shift. The peeling paint on the porch had been redone, by their own hands on a sunny Saturday with help from a neighbor. The squeaky swing still squeaked, but now it held 2 kids instead of just 1, their legs kicking in unison as they argued over whose turn it was to push. The fridge was still covered in drawings, but now some of them included stick figure versions of their father, small, distant, but present. He'd kept his word. Ice cream happened, first at a park bench with a social worker nearby, then at a booth in a quiet diner. Then finally, just the 3 of them at their kitchen table with bowls and spoons. He wasn't perfect. He still missed calls sometimes. He still carried old habits like heavy coats. But he was trying. And that, their mother had told them, was enough. For now. The boy didn't call him Dad yet. Not out loud. But he no longer flinched when he heard his voice. That too was progress. At school, the boy had become the kind of kid teachers trusted without question. Not because he was the smartest or the loudest, but because he listened. He noticed when a classmate sat alone at lunch. He held the door for the lunch lady. He raised his hand not just to answer but to ask, "Can we go over that again? I think someone's still confused." His teacher once told his mother, "He leads with his heart." That's rare. He didn't see it that way. He just remembered how it felt to be small and unheard, and he never wanted anyone else to feel that alone. His sister, now 6, had blossomed. She talked constantly, asked endless questions, and insisted on reading bedtime stories to her big brother to practice. She'd started piano lessons at the community center, and though she hit more wrong notes than right, she played with such joy that no one minded. Their mother sat through every recital, front row, clapping the loudest. One evening, as the boy helped his sister with her homework, their mother came in with 3 mugs of hot chocolate. She set one down in front of each of them, then sat on the floor like she used to when they were little. No phone, no laundry waiting, just them. "You know," she said after a quiet sip, "I used to think being a good mom meant never letting you see me struggle, but I was wrong. Being a good mom means showing you how to keep going, even when it's hard." The boy looked at her. "You've always been a good mom," he said simply. She smiled, but her eyes got that soft, faraway look they sometimes did when she was remembering something painful. "I didn't always feel like one," she admitted. "But you never stopped believing in me, even when I didn't." He didn't know what to say to that, so he just reached over and squeezed her hand, and she squeezed back. Later that night, after his sister was asleep and the house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator, he sat on the back steps like he used to. The air was cool, the stars bright. He thought about that day in court, the cold floor, the heavy silence, the way his voice had trembled when he said, "I just want my mom to sleep again." He hadn't known then that those words would do more than change a judge's mind. They'd changed everything. They'd given his mother permission to ask for help. They'd reminded his father that love isn't just about rights, it's about showing up. They'd shown his sister that her feelings mattered. And they'd taught him that speaking your truth even when your voice shakes is one of the bravest things you can do. He wasn't a hero. He knew that. He was just a kid who loved his family, but sometimes that's enough. Inside, the back door opened softly. His mother stepped out, wrapping a blanket around his shoulders without a word. She sat beside him, looking up at the sky. "Beautiful night," she said. "Yeah," he agreed. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the kind that only comes when you're completely safe with someone. "You've grown so much," she said finally, "not just taller." "Inside, too," he shrugged. "Guess I had good teachers." She laughed, a real warm sound that carried into the dark. Then she leaned her head against his shoulder, just like he used to do with her all those months ago. And in that moment, under a sky full of stars with the house warm behind them and the future wide open ahead, they were exactly where they were meant to be. No grand speeches. No dramatic endings. Just a family, healing in real time. One ordinary day at a time. Because real transformation doesn't happen in a single moment. It happens in 1,000 small ones. Shared meals, late-night talks, second chances, and the quiet courage to keep loving even when it's hard. And for this little boy and his family, that was more than enough. It was everything.